Hey, you guys. As a pop culture nerd in her late 40s, I'll admit that I grumble a lot about today's television. Most of it feels like a dumpster fire, and I know I'm not the only Gen Xer thinking that. That's one of the reasons why I started this channel, to celebrate the killer pop culture that we grew up with. However, I'm not here today to whine about current TV. I'd rather talk about something I enjoy. But instead of the usual 70s, 80s, and 90s TV classics, I'm going to dive into awesome shows from the last 25 years that were made for us Gen Xers. I'm talking about 21st century gems that aired at some point between 2000 and today that capture our generation's sarcastic soul, or our DIY grit, or our love for nostalgia. But that's not all. These shows were either created by a Gen Xer or they starred Xers who lived the golden era along with us and who were heavily inspired by our elite pop culture. There's even a few shows on this list that actually have those peak civilization years of the 80s and 90s as their setting. From traditional sitcoms to mind bending dramas, these picks hit that sweet spot of growing up too fast but never growing out of the fun. I've actually got quite a few titles spanning the last quarter century, all screaming Gen X louder than a dial up modem. If you're looking for newer shows to binge, this is the video for you. My name is Natalie, this is my so called Gen X life, and here is a list of the most Gen X TV shows from the past 25 years that I absolutely love. I'm going to start off this video with the TV show that inspired it, The League. The League is Gen X distilled into a fantasy football sitcom starring a stellar cast of Gen Xers that include Mark Duplass as Pete Eckhart, Nick Kroll as Rodney Ruxin, Katie Aselton as Jenny, John LaJoy as Taco, Paul Scheer as Andre, and Steven Ranazzisi as Kevin. And I know I probably butchered all of those names, but I don't care. They're amazing. This crew lives for draft day rivalries and trading crude insults like it's a 90s basement showdown. The show's sarcastic, improv heavy humor and slacker vibe capture a generation that grew up on Seinfeld and The Simpsons, refusing to fully embrace adulting. It's all about clinging to youthful freedom. For example, epic bets over who gets the Shiva trophy and an investigation into who are Eskimo brothers, while dodging real responsibility with a charm that shrugs off polish. Packed with 80s and 90s references from hair metal to Die Hard, it is a love letter to Gen X's pop culture roots and the friendships we made in our youth. The petty grudges and unapologetic chaos feels like quarter beer fueled nights, making The League a hilarious example of 21st century television for a generation that thrived on independence and irreverence. I cannot put into words how much I love this show, and you don't need to know anything about football to enjoy it. How I Met Your Mother is a show that was made by and for Xennials, a cohort of Gen Xers born in the late 70s and Millennials born in the early 80s. This pop culture treasure chest follows a tight knit crew of friends who met in college in the mid to late 90s and who are stumbling through love, careers, and epic bar nights in New York City while in their 20s and 30s with a smirk and a nod to simpler times. Gen Xer Josh Radnor stars as Ted, Neil Patrick Harris plays the cynical Barney Stinson, Allison Hannigan stars as Lily, Colby Smulders is the millennial of the group, she plays Robin Scherbatsky, and then there's Jason Segel, who stars as the lovable mixtape-obsessed Marshall Erickson. I think he is the one who absolutely steals this show. Ted's endless quest to tell his kids how he met their mom, complete with romantic detours, reps a generation caught between earnest hope and sarcastic detachment, honed by 90s rom-coms like When Harry Met Sally. Barney's over-the-top schemes and Marshall's nostalgic quirks, like his devotion to Star Wars and college playlists, scream 80s kids energy. It's about finding purpose after the 90s party ended, wrapped in clever banter and pop culture callbacks that feel like flipping through a Gen X scrapbook. Perfect for a generation that grew up skeptical but still dreaming. The final season and the series finale may be controversial, and there is quite the story behind why it happened, but the quality of the first 8 seasons is worth a binge of this amazing series. promoted the British Premier League, stars Sudeikis as the titular Ted Lasso. It's a fish out of water tale that follows Ted, who is an American football coach who gets a job coaching British soccer. If the premise seems a bit absurd, it absolutely is. But wow, does this show deliver in every way? Other extras in the cast include Hunt as Coach Beard, Brett Goldstein as the gruff Roy Kent, Hannah Waddingham as Rebecca Welton, and Nick Mohammed as Nate Shelley. Ted Lasso blends optimism with a skeptical edge that feels like Cheers meets Seinfeld. Roy's sarcastic growl pairs with Ted's earnest pep talks, loaded with never-ending Gen X pop culture nods, Top Gun quotes, 80s rom-com vibes. He even gives us Allen Iverson's rant about practice. If you know, you know. Ted Lasso is a show about underdogs fighting cynicism, resonating with a generation that grew up on scrappy wins and big hearted rebels. Goldstein's Roy, with his weathered wit, channels the Gen X knack for cutting through fluff, while Ted's quiet defiance of gloom mirrors a cohort that balanced hope with realism. It's a modern anthem for latchkey kids who turn DIY grit into something unexpectedly uplifting, proving Gen X spirit indoors.
Give me some love, time in a dream. Give me the hope to run out of steam.
Community is a Gen X masterpiece from Dan Harmon that is set at the chaotic Greendale Community College, starring extras Joel McHale as the snarky Jeff Winger, Danny Pudi as Abed, Yvette Nicole Brown as Shirley, and Jim Rash as Dean Craig Pelton. The Xennials in the cast include Allison Brie as Annie Edison, Jillian Jacobs as Britta Perry, and Donald Glover as Troy Barnes. Rounding out the main cast is comedy legend Chevy Chase as Pierce Hawthorne. This sitcom about a quirky community college study group dives into meta humor and pop culture obsession that showcases Harmon's love for all things 80s and 90s. Jeff's aloof cynicism cuts through the absurdity, while Abed's 80s and 90s movie references, like staging a Goodfellas tribute, hit Gen X nostalgia hard. Their insane adventures, from paintball wars to blanket forts, reflect a scrappy outsider spirit that defines 70s and 80s kids who made their own fun. It's smart, irreverent, and proudly weird, with layered jokes, season-long setups and payoffs, and a cult following that scream Gen X. Perfect for a generation that loved underdog stories and laughed at the establishment from the sidelines. And did I mention that many of the most memorable episodes were directed by the Russo brothers, who would go on to direct movies like Avengers Endgame? And I cannot finish up this segment without mentioning the season 3 episode Remedial Chaos Theory, which I believe is one of the best episodes of television ever made. And there is an epic meme that backs up my claim. My God, this show is so good. All I can say is 6 seasons in a movie.
Now the story of a wealthy family who lost everything, and the one son who had no choice but to keep them all together.
Arrested Development is the brilliantly bananas sitcom that first hit Fox in 2003 and gave us 3 golden seasons through 2006, plus a Netflix revival later, because Gen X loves a dysfunctional family we can root for. Created by Mitchell Hurwitz, a Gen X master of absurdity, it stars Jason Bateman as Michael Bluth, the semi-sane son holding together a clan of rich weirdos, with Portia de Rossi as his icy sister Lindsay, Will Arnett as gobsmackingly clueless Job, and Tony Hale as baby brother Buster clutching his hook hand dreams. Add in Jessica Walter as the martini-swigging matriarch Lucille, and Jeffrey Tambor as the shady patriarch George, and it's a Gen X fever dream, sharp, chaotic, and stuffed with 80s and 90s callbacks like frozen banana stands, final countdown montages, and the classic line, "I've made a huge mistake." Arrested Development is a cult classic with layered gags and a sharp edge, honed by 80s and 90s comedy. Bateman's dry delivery and Arnett's manic energy capture Gen X's knack for laughing in excess while dodging responsibility. It's smart, sarcastic, and a little broken, just like the generation that made it a hit. Party Down is an under-the-radar comedy that popped up on Starz back in 2009 and gave us 2 pitch-perfect seasons plus a 2023 revival. Created by a Gen X posse that includes John Enbaum, Rob Thomas, Dan Etheridge, and Paul Rudd, it stars Adam Scott as Henry, a washed-up actor, slinging shrimp puffs with a crew of misfits, including Jane Lynch as the unfiltered Constance, Lizzie Kaplan as the snarky Casey, and Martin Starr as the sci-fi obsessed Roman. win. Ken Marino's Ron, the try-hard manager, is the cherry on the top of this cast. This crew of failed dreamers caters gigs with biting wit, blending dead-end jobs with sarcastic camaraderie, a slacker flick vibe for a generation that laughed through setbacks. Scott's dry resignation and Lynch's quirky optimism channel our knack for finding humor in the grind, shaped by 90s indie films like Clerks. This is about clinging to faded ambitions like Henry's acting past while shrugging at the present, a perfect Gen X snapshot. The show's cult status and sharp dialogue make it a fun look back at those 90s hustle days, chasing Hollywood or just a paycheck, served with a side of pink bow ties and that bittersweet we're in this together glow. Parks and Recreation, the NBC gem that kicked off in 2009 and gave us 7 glorious seasons of small town heart. It's a total Gen X comfort blanket. Co-created by Greg Daniels and Michael Schur, 2 Xers who know how to spin bureaucracy into gold, it stars Amy Poehler as Leslie Knope, a relentlessly chipper parks director with binders full of dreams. Rashida Jones plays her cool pal, Ann Perkins. Chris Pratt is the lovable goof, Andy. And Nick Offerman's Ron Swanson is the mustache of liberty we all secretly salute. Aubrey Plaza's deadpan April and Aziz Ansari's over-the-top Tom round out the original crew. Then in late season 2, Adam Scott joined the cast as Ben Wyatt, the nerdy accountant with a heart, and Rob Lowe, the 80s Brat Pat legend who literally swoops in as Chris Traeger, the hyper-fit optimist who's so peppy he could have starred in a Jane Fonda workout tape. My God, he is pure Gen X eye candy with a side of I still got it swagger. Leslie's relentless optimism clashes with Ron's rugged individualism, crafting a workplace comedy that blends dreamers and cynics working together in the small Indiana town of Pawnee. Poehler's bubbly drive and Offerman's deadpan libertarian streak capture a generation juggling hope and shrugs. The show's earnest humor and sarcastic undertones make it a Gen X gem, proof that even in bureaucracy, our spirit of independence shines through. Parks and Rec is a sunny throwback to when we believed in community, complete with waffles, mixed CDs, and all, wrapped in that late 90s optimism we still kind of miss. It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, the FX turned FXX juggernaut that kicked off in 2005 and is still going strong with 16 seasons and counting because our generation thrives on glorious train wrecks. Created by Rob McElhaney, a Gen Xer born in 77, just like me, he stars as Mac, the delusional bar co-owner, alongside Charlie Kelly, another Xer born in 76, as Charlie, the wild-eyed janitor who'd rather huff glue than grow up. Glenn Howerton, another bicentennial baby, plays Dennis, the sociopathic golden boy, while Caitlin Olsen, born in 75, still seen as Dee, the gang's perpetually ignored firecracker. Danny DeVito, the elder statesman of the group, crashes in as Frank, the sleazy dad who's living his worst, best life. This show is crude, chaotic, and unapologetic, like a mixtape of our loudest, dumbest nights. This is a dark comedy playground about 5 selfish slackers who run Patty's Pub with zero growth, unleashing crude antics that channel Beavis and Butthead type chaos. It's pure Gen X, embracing anti-hero vibes and flipping off conformity with gleeful anarchy. Day's wild-eyed rants and McElhaney's delusional bravado reflect a generation raised on 90s irreverence, thriving in unpolished rebellion. From Sweet D's dating a retarded person to endless scams, it's a middle finger to the mainstream, raw, reckless, and unapologetic. For Gen Xers who grew up dodging the rules and laughing at the absurd, Sunny is a twisted mirror of their DIY ethos, proving some never outgrow the slacker spirit.
How many ways to say I love you?
Rules of Engagement is a CBS sitcom that kicked off in 2007 and gave us 7 solid seasons of relationship hijinks. This is a hidden gem for Gen Xers who love a good laugh at coupledom. Created by Tom Hertz, it stars Patrick Warburton, who will forever be our Seinfeld putty, as Jeff, the gruff married guy who's mastered the art of selective hearing, paired with Megan Price as Audrey, his sharp-witted wife who keeps him in check. Oliver Hudson, Goldie Hawn's bicentennial baby, plays Adam, the dopey fiance, while Bianca Kachlik, another 76er, shines as Jennifer, his sassy better half. And then there's the amazing David Spade, who rounds it all out as Russell, the sleazy bachelor we can't help but root for. For me, Rules of Engagement is a cozy rewind to those late 90s, early 2000s vibes when dating, marriage, and dodging commitment felt like a sitcom we all starred in. This show nails Gen X domesticity in the 2000s, pitting married life, which is Jeff and Audrey, against Russell's bachelor antics, with sharp banter that echoes Married with Children. Spade's snarky, skirt chasing Russell channels our skepticism of romance, honed by our signature cynicism. The show's mix of settle down gripes and single life chaos reflects a generation balancing grown up rules with a slacker heart. This show keeps the sarcasm flowing, and that's why I believe that Rules of Engagement is a witty, nostalgic must watch. Reno 911 is Comedy Central's mockumentary masterpiece that hit screens in 2003 and ran for 6 wild seasons, plus a recent Paramount Plus revival, and it stars a slew of Gen Xers, including Thomas Lennon as Lieutenant Jim Dangle, Wendy McClendon-Covey as Deputy Clementine Johnson, Niecy Nash as Deputy Renisha Williams, Robert Ben Garrett as Deputy Travis Jr., Cedric Yarbrough as Deputy Jones, and Carrie Kenny Silver as Deputy Trudy Weigel. And of course, we can't forget Nig Swarson as the fantastic Carrie. Oh my god, he's such a great character. This show is about a bumbling sheriff's department that stumbles through absurdity. Think botched arrest and short shorts, with dry, improv-driven humor that pokes fun at authority with a low-budget charm that our generation adores. From mullets to misadventures, Reno 911 is a chaotic salute to a generation who laugh at the system while dodging responsibility. It's a comedy squad firing on all cylinders that is a gleeful flashback to when we flipped channels between Cops and SNL, laughing at the absurdity of it all. Badge or no badge.
I can't do this all on my own. No, I know I'm no Superman.
Scrubs, the NBC turned ABC sitcom that launched in 2001 and gave us 9 seasons of hospital hilarity. It's Gen X workplace magic, a favorite of mine that turned bedpans into comedy gold. Created by Bill Lawrence, the same guy who gave us Ted Lasso, Scrubs stars Xer Zach Braff as JD, the daydreaming doc with a head full of goofy fantasies, alongside Sarah Chalk as Elliot, the adorably neurotic overachiever, and clueless Donald Faison as Turk, the bromance king who'd high-five through surgery. There's also John C. McGinley, a lovable boomer who chews scenery as Dr. Cox, the sarcastic mentor we all secretly wanted, while Xer Judy Reyes brings the sass as Carla. This show is a warm hug from the early 2000s, those scrappy Scrubs-wearing days when work felt like a quirky hangout, set to a soundtrack that we'd burn onto a CD. Brass, quirky narration, and both Faison and Chalk's sharp wit channel a generation raised on pop culture nods and sarcastic coping. It's a hospital comedy about finding heart amid chaos, resonating with 80s kids who grew up fast but kept dreaming. From eagle lifts to bittersweet endings, this show is unpolished, funny, and real. For a generation that balanced hope and snark, Scrubs is a perfect fit, proving even medical school can feel like a 90s hangout. Grounded for Life was a Fox-turned-WB sitcom that hit the airwaves in 2001 and gave us 5 seasons of blue-collar family chaos, a Gen X treasure all about suburban screw-ups in the early aughts. Created by Bill Martin and Mike Schiff, it stars Xer Donald Logue as Sean Finnerty, the lovable Irish dad who's always one beer away from a bad idea, and Megan Price as Claudia, his quick-witted wife juggling kids and sanity. Kevin Corrigan shines as Eddie, the slacker uncle with a smirk, while Lindsay Bartleson and Griffin Frazen play the teenage terrors Lily and Jimmy. Sean and Claudia are a punk rock couple who raises kids with a sarcastic edge, blending 90s rebellion with family life. Logue's flustered charm and Price's quick wit capture a generation that grew up on Roseanne and grunge, holding on to youthful defiance. The show's messy, funny take on suburbia feels like a latchkey kid's playbook, shrugging at perfection. From Sean's bar tales to Claudia's exasperated fixes, this show is a Gen X love letter to raising hell while raising kids. My Name is Earl is an NBC show that rolled out in 2005 and gave us 4 seasons of karmic hilarity. It's a Gen X classic that made Trailer Park Redemption a riot. Created by Greg Garcia, it stars Jason Lee as Earl Hickey, a mullet sporting ex con fixing his past one good deed at a time, with Ethan Suplee as his dim but lovable brother Randy tagging along. Jamie Presley sparkles as Joy, the sassy ex wife with a hair trigger temper, while Eddie Steeples brings the chill as Darnell, the Crab Shack philosopher. Nadine Velasquez rounds out the Gen X cast as Catalina, the maid with Moxie. Lee's earnest yet scruffy vibe captures a generation that grew up on blue collar sitcoms, seeking redemption in the everyday. From lottery wins to petty crimes, My Name is Earl embraces the weird while highlighting a generation that thrived on independence and who laughed at their own messes. My Wife and Kids was an ABC sitcom that bounced onto screens in 2001 and delivered 5 seasons of family laughs. It's a Gen X delight that turned household chaos into pure joy. Co-created by and starring Damon Wayans, he plays Michael Kyle, the wisecracking dad with a knack for life lessons, alongside Tisha Campbell as Jay, his warm, no-nonsense wife keeping everyone in line. My Wife and Kids served up the laughs, with Michael's laid-back dad humor meeting Jay's sharp-tongued sass in an early 2000s family sitcom that feels grounded yet playful. Campbell's vibrant energy channels a generation raised on Martin and 90s vibes, juggling parenting with a wink. The Kyle's dynamic, sassy teens, quirky antics, mirrors our generation's knack for keeping it real amid the chaos, with their kids almost stealing the show thanks to Michael's schemes and Janet's eye rolls. It's a warm throwback to a time when independence ruled and family time meant sarcastic banter over dinner.
1, 2, 3. You got a wife and kid in love with you. Yes, dear. Say the goblin broken for this too.
Yes Dear was a CBS sitcom that landed in 2000 and gave us 6 cozy seasons of family shenanigans all the way through 2006. It's a total comfort watch, reminding me of the days when Gen Xers were young parents and navigating life in their early 30s. Co-created by Greg Garcia, a Gen X wizard whose name comes up quite a lot in this video because he knew how to make everyday chaos hilarious. Yes Dear stars a strong cast of Xers, including Anthony Clark as Greg, the uptight dad with a heart of gold, and Uncle Buck's Jean Louisa Kelly as Kim, his sweet wife keeping the whole circus together. Then you've got Mike O'Malley and Liza Snyder as Jimmy and Christine, the laid-back in-laws who bring the messy, lovable vibe to their suburban doorstep. Yes Dear is like flipping through an old photo album from those early 2000s days when family life was a loud, goofy sitcom all its own, and we couldn't get enough.
I'm not perfect and I'm no snitch, but I can tell you she's a bitch.
Don't Trust the Bee in Apartment 23 was an ABC sitcom that swaggered onto screens in 2012 and gave us 2 seasons of glorious, unhinged urban madness before getting the axe in 2013. Created by Nanachka Khan, a Gen X comedy ninja who will be mentioned again in this video, this show stars Kristen Ritter as Chloe, a morally dubious party girl who'd scam you blind while sipping rosé, and Dribble Walker as June, the wide-eyed Midwesterner who's her perfect sitcom foil. But my favorite part of this show is James Vanderbeek, a peak Gen X heartthrob who plays an exaggerated version of himself with a wink and a smile, spoofing his Dawson's Creek days like a pro. I found this show to be so much fun, but I think the name of it was what led it to its early demise. It's just kind of off-putting. Plus, ABC just didn't give it enough time or the right time slot to find its groove. Still, I still think it's very much worth watching. Raising Hope was a Fox sitcom that ran from 2010 to 2014 for 4 seasons of delightfully offbeat family dysfunction. Created by Greg Garcia, a Gen X mastermind who gave us the previously mentioned My Name is Earl, it stars Lucas Neff as Jimmy Chance, a slacker dad raising a baby with zero clue, alongside Shannon Woodward as his snarky crush Sabrina. Then there's Martha Plimpton, Gen X royalty from the Goonies, stealing scenes as the chain-smoking Mom Virginia, and Garrett Dillahunt as Bert, the dad who's one mullet away from a 90s time warp. And did I mention they're the grandparents in the show? I still don't feel like we're old enough for that, especially for a show that started 15 years ago. But that's kind of the basis of this show, having kids super young. Anyways, legend Cloris Leachman rounds out the cast as the unhinged mama, but it's the Gen X crew, Garcia, Plimpton, and Dillahunt, that nails that we're barely holding it together vibe. For me, it's a sarcastic nod to when parenthood felt like a punk song, messy, loud, and weirdly proud of it. This one is for my brother. Trailer Park Boys, the Canadian mockumentary that kicked off in 2001 and somehow churned out 12 seasons of glorious, greasy chaos through 2018. Cooked up by Mike Clattenburg and starring Gen Xers Rob Wells, John Paul Tremblay, and Mike Smith, better known as Ricky, Julian, and Bubbles, these three Nova Scotia trailer park philosophers bumble through get rich quick schemes, dodging cops, and chain smoking life's problems away. It's got that scrappy camcorder shot charm we Xers ate up in the early 2000s when reality TV was king and we still thought living off the grid sounded badass. Tremblay's cool headed Julian anchors the chaos, channeling our generation's laid back rebellion against the mainstream. From pot growing to liquor fueled plans, it's a DIY salute to 70s and 80s kids who made their own rules. Trailer Park Boys is a grimy time capsule, back when we cheered for losers with big dreams, a bottle of rum, and zero shame. I had to make an executive decision on this one because it started in late 99, but there was no way I was going to leave out this ode to after school specials. Strangers with Candy was a warped Comedy Central gem that ran from 99 through 2000 for 3 seasons of pure Gen X lunacy. Cooked up by Amy Sedaris, Paul Danello, and Stephen Colbert, three Xers who turned their twisted improv chops into a sitcom, it stars Sedaris as Jerry Blank, a 46-year-old ex-junkie dropout crashing back into high school like a human wrecking ball. With Danello as the sleazy art teacher and Colbert as the closeted history buff, it's a dark, deadpan jab at after school specials dripping with late 90s, early 2000s irony. For me, Strangers with Candy is a time warped zinger back when we thought mocking wholesome TV with a chain smoking anti hero was the ultimate power move, and honestly, it still kind of is. Archer oozes Gen X snark. Led by H. John Benjamin, an Xer, he plays Sterling Archer, a suave spy with an 80s obsession. It's a reverent take on espionage, complete with martinis, quips, and workplace dysfunction. Channels a generation raised on moonlighting and Bond flicks. Benjamin's deadpan delivery drips with cynicism, tossing out Top Gun references and sarcastic jabs like a VHS rental clerk gone rogue. Danger Zone. I had to do it. The show's sharp humor and reckless chaos reflect Gen X's anti establishment streak, blending spy tropes with slacker energy. From Archer's mommy issues to Pam's HR nightmares, it's a workplace comedy for those of us that grew up dodging rules and loving the absurd. For Xers who savor smart satire over polished perfection, Archer is a neon lit tribute to their irreverent spirit. Children's Hospital is Gen X absurdity unleashed. It's an unhinged medical spoof that stumbled onto the web in 2008 before Adult Swim scooped it up for 7 gloriously deranged seasons through 2016. Created by Rob Corddry, Gen X's resident chaos agent, it's a fever dream of sexy doctors and dumb gags, starring a lineup that reads like a 90s alt comedy reunion. You've got Corddry as the clown-faced Dr. Blake, Lake Bell purring as the sultry Dr. Cat, Aaron Hayes smirking through the absurdity, Rob Hubel oozing sleaze, and Ken Marino hamming it up. All Xers who cut their teeth on MTV and Upright Citizens Brigade. Toss in Megan Mullally as the batty chief, and later Malin Ackerman subbing in with her own warped charm. It's a sarcastic, low-budget love letter to the days when we thought parody was peak rebellion. This medical parody delivers over-the-top gags like clown doctors and fake bloodbaths with deadpan humor that echoes MST3K late-night vibes. From absurd surgeries to soap opera twists, it's a fever dream for 80s kids who made their own fun. Corddry's unhinged performance drives the chaos, channeling a generation that grew up on Saturday Night Live sketches and 90s weirdness. Its short, wild episodes and cult appeal reflect our generation's love for the offbeat, shrugging off polish for raw laughs. Children's Hospital is a Gen X gem that's proudly, hilariously unpolished. It's a twisted rewind to our snarky prime. Medical drama, but make it stupid.
I'm going down to South Park, gonna have myself a time.
South Park may have premiered when I was in college back in 1997, but since it's still on the air after 26 seasons, because Gen X doesn't know how to quit, this foul-mouthed cartoon absolutely could not be ignored. Created by legends Trey Parker and Matt Stone, two Gen Xers who turned their 90s basement VHS vibes into a cultural Molotov cocktail, it's got crude paper cutout kids, Stan, Kyle, Cartman, and Kenny, skewering everything from Scientology to Santa with zero chill. For anyone in our age bracket, South Park is the ultimate throwback to when we thought flipping off the world was deep. Equal parts, remember Beavis and Butthead, and wow, we're still this petty. It's our generation's middle finger to sanctimony, wrapped in fart jokes and an incredible knack for staying relevant. Brooklyn Nine-Nine was a cop comedy that kicked off in 2013 and ran for 8 seasons, proving Gen X could still hijack network TV with a grin. Leading the charge was Andy Samberg, peak Gen Xer and Lonely Island alum, playing Jake Peralta, a detective who'd rather, quote, die hard than file a report. Basically, our slacker spirit in a badge. Co-created by Dan Gore and Michael Schur, more Gen X brains who grew up on SNL reruns, it's got Stephanie Beatriz and Joe Lo Truglio adding to the precinct's sarcastic charm, plus the late Andre Brower as Captain Holt, who was the perfect foil for Jake. For me, it's a sharp, silly escape, kind of like sneaking a beer at your dead end summer job, but with better one liners and zero chance of a pink slip. This show is too funny for its own good. Cobra Kai is Gen X nostalgia cranked to 11, reviving the classic 80s movie The Karate Kid, starring boomer Ralph Macchio as Daniel LaRusso and Xer William Zabka as Johnny Lawrence. These middle-aged rivals still bicker over 80s grudges, mentoring teens while clinging to their glory days. It's a hilarious, heartfelt jab at aging, blending karate kicks with Gen X irony. Think Johnny blasting poison while Daniel polishes his vintage cars. The show captures a generation that grew up on Back to the Future and arcade games, refusing to let go of youthful swagger. Macchio and Zabka bring lived-in charm, embodying rebels who traded leather jackets for dad jeans, but still fight for redemption. It's about passing the torch with a wink, making Cobra Kai the perfect reboot. It's nostalgia with a side of self-aware humor, and for my money, it's the absolute best example of how to revive a beloved IP. Did you think that Family Guy would be on this list? Well, it could have been, but that show failed to quit while it was ahead. So instead, I went with Seth MacFarlane's more recent show, Ted. Ted brings Gen X irreverence to the small screen, a prequel to the foul-mouthed teddy bear's big screen antics. It stars Seth MacFarlane as Ted's voice and Scott Grimes as Maddie Bennett, both Xers. It's set in 1993, and it follows Ted and teen John Bennett navigating high school with crude humor and 90s flair, kind of like Beavis and Butthead meets Family Guy. McFarlane's sarcastic Teddy and Grimes' gruff Vietnam vet dad vibe channel a generation raised on TV and chaos. The show's packed with 80s and 90s nods, VCRs, Sunny D, and Nirvana riffs, blending slacker rebellion with a sneaky heart. It's Gen X to the core, unpolished, anti-authority, and laughing at the absurd, like Ted sparking joints while dodging detention. Ted is truly a nostalgic, profanity-laced time capsule.
I'm twisted up inside, but nonetheless I feel the need to say.
The Goldbergs is a Gen X 1980s family album starring Winnie McClendon-Covey, an Xer, as Beverly Goldberg. Set in a Reagan-era suburb with the time frame always referred to as 1980-something, the show follows young Adam's camcorder chronicles and Beverly's smothering love, packed with Atari games and Goonies vibes. McClendon-Covey's over-the-top mom energy captures a generation that grew up on family ties and growing pains, balancing warmth with sarcastic edge. The show's nostalgic nods, mixtapes, neon clothes feel like a VHS rewind for 80s kids who lived through it. From Murray's grumbles to Erica's rebellions, it's a heartfelt salute to 80s chaos wrapped in Gen X humor. For a cohort that thrived on independence and pop culture overload, The Goldbergs is a cozy, hilarious throwback.
Fresh off the boat, you can tell the way I wear my clothes that I'm fresher than a
Fresh Off the Boat was an ABC sitcom that aired from 2015 to 2020, clocking 6 seasons of 90s immigrant family chaos. Loosely based on Eddie Wong's memoir, it's got Gen Xer Randall Park as the dad, chasing his cowboy steakhouse dreams in Orlando, while Constance Wu, an Exennial icon, plays the mom who'd haggle the devil for a discount. Nanachka Khan, a Gen X comedy brain, created this series that turned a Taiwanese American family's culture clash into a sarcastic salute to growing up weird in suburbia. The kid characters in the show are supposed to be the oldest millennials born in the early 80s, but I still consider this a good watch for Gen X because of the creator and star Randall Park. Plus, I find it unique because I watch it through the eyes of the parents raising kids in the 90s, which is the opposite of how I watched actual sitcoms made in that time frame, which was through the eyes of the kids. Does that make sense? Anyways, Fresh Off the Boat is a fuzzy rewind to Jenko jeans, 90s rap music, and Tamagotchis with a side of We're Not in Chinatown Anymore grit. Proof you could laugh at the American dream without necessarily fully buying the sales pitch. I had to make another executive decision about this one because it started airing in very late 1999, but the majority of Freaks and Geeks aired on NBC in 2000, and this one's just too good to ignore. Freaks and Geeks was a one-season miracle that became a Gen X cult classic that we didn't deserve but totally claimed. It was cooked up by boomer Paul Feig and executive produced by extra Judd Apatow. And the show is set in 1980s Michigan, where high school is a war zone of freaks, geeks, and bad haircuts. Since it was set in 1980, the focus of this show is on the youngest boomers and oldest Xers, kids born in the early to mid 1960s. But the cast is a Gen X all-star lineup. Linda Cardellini as the rebel chick, James Franco smoldering as the burnout, Seth Rogen mumbling one-liners, and Jason Segel drumming his feelings, Busy Phillips breaking hearts, and John Francis Daly as the nerd who'd rather slay orcs than ask a girl out. For me, Freaks and Geeks is less about rose tinted nostalgia glasses and more about laughing at the burn of being perpetually uncool in high school. It may have been axed early, but Freaks and Geeks left us smirking at the wreckage. Everybody Hates Chris is a sitcom that was on the airwaves from 2005 to 2009, and it gave us 4 solid seasons of 80s Brooklyn grit with a side of snark. Inspired by the teenage misadventures of Gen X comedy king Chris Rock, who narrates it like he's still venting about his mom's thrift store rules, it's a masterclass of turning an 80s kid's woes into comedy gold. The show stars Terry Crews, another Gen Xer, flexing his comedic chops as the dad who'd rather duct tape the fridge than buy a new one, and Tina Arnold as the mom who could guilt trip you into next Tuesday. Everybody Hates Chris is all about surviving the 80s with zero budget and maximum attitude. And I love it for the flip phone free flashbacks and that we walked uphill both ways energy, served with a smirk. Stranger Things is Gen X nostalgia unleashed, so I had to include this Netflix juggernaut that dropped in 2016 in this video. Even though I'm only a fan of the earlier seasons, the show has kind of lost me in recent years, but season 1 is definitely worth the watch for many reasons. Created by Xers, the Duffer Brothers, Stranger Things stars Gen X it girl Winona Ryder as Joyce Byers, and the show is set in the 80s in the small town of Hawkins, Indiana. It's got kids on bikes, walkie-talkies, malls, synth beats, monster hunts, and a Demogorgon ripping through Hawkins like it's auditioning for a Spielberg flick. It's pure catnip for anyone who grew up worshiping E.T. and the Goonies. This show is pure nostalgia with a supernatural twist. Basically, it's a neon-soaked love letter to our childhood.
Take my love, take my land, take me where I cannot stand.
Firefly was the little sci-fi show that could, until it couldn't, airing for one glorious season in 2002 before the suits yanked it. What a crime. This space western is the ultimate Gen X sci-fi fix, cooked up by Joss Whedon and starring a slew of Xers, including Nathan Fillion, Alan Tudyk, Gina Torres, and Marina Baccarin. This show's got everything: a ragtag crew of misfits that dodge authority, a beat-up spaceship called Serenity, and a vibe that says, the future is cool, but it's also broke and sarcastic. Think Han Solo meets Slacker. It's anti-corporate, pro-freedom, and dripping with that Gen X distrust of authority we all nursed through the 80s and 90s. I adore Firefly because it's a show that doesn't care about shiny utopias. It's about surviving, smirking, and sticking it to the man. Basically, the Gen X ethos with laser guns and cowboy hats. Fillion's roguish charm and Torres's steely resolve capture a generation that loved underdog tales and questioned the system. Firefly's cult status, fueled by a short run, mirrors our generation's knack for champion the overlooked with a DIY vibe that feels like a 90s indie flick. Younger is a show that only a Gen Xer could pull off because it's about a girl in her 40s posing as a girl in her late 20s. And if you've seen the meme, it makes sense. This stars Xer Sutton Foster as Liza Miller, who decides to pose as a millennial to reboot her career when she discovers that people don't seem to want to hire middle-aged women. Younger is a sly take on aging and hustle, and it mirrors a generation that navigated post-90s shifts with a wink. Think Reality Bites meets modern publishing. Foster's warm, witty performance captures our knack for adapting while staying true to our roots. The show's blend of workplace comedy and identity twists reflects a generation that grew up on MTV and reinvented itself, dodging midlife cliche with style. From Liza's secret to her flirty banter, it's a Gen X tale of resilience, proof that we can still surprise the world one sarcastic quip at a time. Oh, Entourage, the show that ran from 2004 to 2011 and basically turned the Hollywood bro fantasy into a Gen X soap opera about a crew of fast-talking dudes living large. It was inspired by none other than Gen X poster boy Mark Wahlberg, who executive produced this ode to his own I Made It glory days. You've got Jeremy Piven as Ari Gold, the ultimate Gen X cynic, screaming into flip phones like it's 1999, channeling every 40-something's inner I'm too old for this crap energy. Other Gen X stars include Adrian Grenier as Vincent Chase, Kevin Connolly as Eric Murphy, Kevin Dillon as Johnny Drama, and Jerry Ferrera as Turtle. This whole show is pure nostalgia bait. Fast cars, faster women, and a soundtrack that'll make you miss your old Napster downloads. Entourage is a sarcastic love letter to chasing dreams while pretending you're still cool. Peak Gen X wish fulfillment, with just enough eye rolls to keep it honest. The show's mix of excess and camaraderie mirrors our generation's love for underdog wins, with a sarcastic edge that cuts through Tinseltown gloss. From red carpet chaos to late night hangouts, it's a nostalgic salute to latchkey kids who turned friendships into empires. For a cohort that thrived on independence and laughed at the hype, Entourage is a flashy, fun throwback. Being Erica is one of my absolute favorites on this list because it's a time-traveling drama all about a Gen Xer who goes back to her high school and college days in the 90s to fix her regrets. This Canadian gem aired from 2009 to 2011, and it stars Gen Xer Erin Carpluck as Erica Strange, a 30-something woman drowning in life's what-ifs, who gets a magical chance to time travel back to her past and fix her regrets with the help of her quirky therapist, Dr. Tom. This is peak Gen X because it's all about that midlife reckoning, looking back at the wild 90s, questioning your choices, and trying to rewrite the script while juggling adult responsibilities. This nostalgic trip is loaded with 90s references, from grunge to dial-up internet, wrapped in a heartfelt story about self-discovery and second chances. It's like a warm hug for anyone who's ever wondered, what if I'd done things differently? It's just a total Gen X mood. Love it, love it, love it. Severance is a Gen X fever dream wrapped in a sleek sci-fi thriller from Gen X director Ben Stiller and starring Gen Xers Adam Scott as Mark Scout and Patricia Arquette as Harmony Cobell. This Apple TV Plus gem dives into a dystopian workplace where employees surgically split their work and personal lives, a twisted take on Gen X's work hard, play hard ethos. Scott's everyman vibe and Arquette's icy authority channel a generation raised on the X-Files and cubicle cynicism, questioning authority with a smirk. The show's retro futuristic aesthetic, think 80s IBM vibes meets eerie minimalism, pairs with dark humor and 90s style paranoia about corporate control. From Mark's quiet rebellion to the eerie wellness sessions, it's a nod to latchkey kids who grew up dodging rules and craving freedom. For Gen Xers who love a mind-bending twist, Severance is a nostalgic gut punch. It's a must-watch. And there you have it, TV shows from the past 25 years that prove Gen X vibes are timeless. From the League's trash-talking crew to Severance's corporate paranoia, these gems bottle up our generation's mix of sarcasm, nostalgia, and scrappy heart. Whether it's 80s throwbacks or 90s slacker anthems, they've got that MTV spirit that we grew up on. Which one's your favorite? What did I miss? Drop it in the comments. I'm dying to know which shows from the past 25 years hit you right in the Gen X feels. And please like and subscribe if you haven't already. It really helps my channel. Okay, bye!